pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Flight downside, speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are tuning in. Welcome to this week's episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. My name is Thomas Burghardt. I'm a writer slash reporter slash webcast host for NASA Spaceflight. Let us know that you can hear us and that you can hear us well, and you can see this beautiful view of Boca Chica, Texas. We are bringing you live views today from Texas via Mary Boca Chica gal, who is joining us tonight, and we also have NASA Spaceflight editor and founder Chris Bergin here tonight, and we are going to be giving you a whole episode of Q&A, max Q&A about Starship, about anything spaceflight related, any news that happened in the past week, or anything coming up next week. Feel free during the entire show to put your messages in chat. We're going to be doing a lot of Q&A today. We'll also do a brief launch recap and things like that, like we normally do. But first, let's say hi to everyone else checking in. Mary and Boca Chica, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. And Chris B is also here. Chris, how you doing?
Good evening, Thomas. Good evening, everybody.
All right, so thank you everyone for tuning in. Always great to have everyone in chat. We got so many people tuning in already. That's awesome. A quick recap of the last week in space before we get into some max Q&A. We did have 3 orbital launches this past week, and I think we have some photos that we can bring up, Michael. But we had a Chinese launch, a Long March 2C rocket with the Haiyang 1D oceanography satellite that went successfully. After that, we had very early this morning / late last night, depending on where you are, we had the Rocket Lab Electron launch with the Don't Stop Me Now mission satellites for NASA, the National Reconnaissance Office, and the Australian Air Force. And that went off successfully. And then finally, this morning, we had a Falcon 9 launch, and we had a beautiful streak shot here from Julia Bergeron for NASA Spaceflight. And that launch went successfully. Successful deployment of 58 Starlink satellites, as well as 3 rideshare payloads for Planet Labs, as well as a successful first stage landing on Of Course I Still Love You. So all around, a very successful morning today in spaceflight. And now we are bringing you a live shot. This is live. This is not a pre-recorded video or anything. Live view of the launch site in Boca Chica, Texas, the Starship launch site. Mary, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're seeing in this view here?
Well, we can see the launch mount that they're still currently working on. Hopefully soon we'll see SN5 down here. And behind that, you can see SN7 test tank, and they're working on that, and hopefully we'll get to see them test it soon. But yeah, it's always busy down here.
It absolutely is, and it's certainly a very busy workspace. You got lots of workers working around. SpaceX still working to finish any repairs and upgrades after Starship SN4 had its end of life, the explosion following a static fire. SpaceX moving forward to the next prototypes to continue the test campaign. You've got that test tank that we're calling SN7 in the background, and I think we suspect that'll finish testing first before they bring the next full Starship prototype, which is actually SN5, correct?
Correct.
And so we are still waiting for SN5 rollout whenever that'll happen, but looking forward to SN7 testing, which could begin in the next few days or so. And they are also working on that brand new launch mount, which you can see front and center in this view. Real quick, a super chat from Richard, $99 for Mary's ticket to Florida. Richard, thank you so
Wow.
much. That is very gratuitous. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Well, I think we'll have to work on getting Mary to a orbital launch in Florida one of these days, so that'll be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I would love that. I really would.
And a huge thank you to everyone who tunes into these, brings in super chats, brings in memberships. These are the kind of things that allow us to bring you live views of Boca Chica like we are today, as well as all of these live streams and all our live coverage. We greatly appreciate it. So thank you for that. So like I said, keep putting questions in the chat. We're gonna spread the questions around, and we're all gonna try and answer from the best of our ability. And we've got a couple questions in chat here that I want to start with. Mary, a question from you. From what property do you shoot the videos? Public, private, how close to the road or entrance? So where do you usually film from?
I usually film. Well, what are we talking about? Just see if my mind went to testing. In testing, I shoot from
So while you,
LBJ
you
next
while,
near the hard checkpoint. But it varies, but usually it's always across the street from the sites. That's a given. But usually just park off the edge, and they usually don't give me any problems. Able to film from all of the locations along the edge of the highway.
Gotcha. And what about when you're
Yeah.
filming like the assembly area or the high bay? Where give people idea who might not be familiar with exactly what the Boca Chica landscape really looks like. Where are you?
When I film, it's across Highway 4, across the street from the build site. And you can film from San Martin Boulevard, which runs from the highway to Weems Street. And we were able to go around the back. I go around the bay shoreline and film from there. And then
Got
the launch site, you're just directly across the street from everything. And wherever you can get a parking spot, you can stop and take pictures, video, whatever.
Gotcha.
Can I just chime in? I'm just watching the
Yeah.
live views, and there's all these United Rental forklift trucks running around like crazy. But there's a guy who was stood on top of SN7 for a second there. He looks like he's installing some kind of pressure gauge. So we can actually see it in the view now. He's stepped off the tank itself. He's back on his crane. But that looks like that same pressure gauge. We've seen it before. I'm trying to think where we've seen it before. I think it was on the other test tanks they've had.
Yeah,
The
the
other boppers.
Yep.
So yeah, that's literally what they're going to do, aren't they? They're going to pressurize it. That's what the test will be. So that's just an interesting little observation while we were talking, because he was just stepping off. So I wanted to quickly note he was just checking that device.
All right. Well, we have another question here about Starship testing from Salvatore. How will they get this to the pad? Will they just have to build each one at the pad? I think they're probably talking about the launch mount. Is the launch mount already at the launch site, or will they need to move it?
The launch mount.
Yeah, the mount we're looking at right
That I do believe was built at the where the landing pad was. They had already started that, and it was almost complete when SN4 had its mishap. And so they were lucky that they had one already available to move quickly.
I wonder if it's questioning if the actual launch mount we're looking at right now is in the position it should be for the testing. I think it is, because like Mary said, they built it at the pad, didn't they? At the landing pad, but they've moved it since the position where it needs to be for SM5 testing. So yeah.
Yeah, it's in its position. Yeah, they won't move it again.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the SN7 test tank that we're seeing behind it is also in the right position for it to do its testing. So there's kind of enough room for two different little testing areas within the launch site, right?
Right. In fact, SN7 is in a new location than the previous test tanks.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because the other test tanks were on, well, from our view, on the opposite side of the launch mount.
That's interesting.
And where this is on the back side, where kind of near where the flare stack would have been.
Now, the thing I wonder, Mary, what do you think about this? Do you think they'll wait to roll at SM5 after they finish testing SN7?
Oh,
I know it's a question, isn't it? Yeah. Because
Yeah,
I think it'd be prudent for him to wait until SN7's completed its testing before they roll SN5 out. Because
yeah, it makes sense.
if SN7 goes pop,
Yeah,
it
Right.
won't be very good for SN5. I mean, I don't think it'd be that bad a pop because they'll probably just fill it with liquid nitrogen. They won't fill it with methane. I don't think.
Right.
So yeah, it won't be. It'll be just like a splosh more than a pop, like
mhm,
one
right,
of the test tanks did before. But I think it'd be prudent for him to just test this tank there and then bring out SM5 onto the actual launch mount.
right.
Yeah. I think I agree with that too. It would just seem like an unnecessary risk to have two vehicles sitting on the pad while you're testing one of them. When
Yeah,
I mean, how long does it take to roll one to the pad? A couple hours. So,
Right.
yeah.
let's see. Well, we got a whole bunch of questions in chat. So let's see. What do we have here? Thomas wants to know, what is the very long black drill? Is there something in the frame that they might be talking about there?
Well, I'm thinking it's for the pilings,
Maybe.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
super heavy
Oh,
launch
there we
site.
go. We've got a picture of it here. Oh, at the super
That's
heavy
it.
pad, I think is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So what's that about?
Chris, do you want to take that? Well, they're drilling holes for pilings, right?
Yeah, that's what we think. We think they're actually doing the foundations for the launch mount for super heavy, which is crazy when you think about it. That they're that far ahead. That they're thinking that far ahead. That they're just basically building these piling foundations for the next launch mount, and that next launch mount will be for super heavy. So that'll be some mount in itself because it's got to take a vehicle so much taller than SN5, SN7, SN6, and what have you. It's going to be a very tall vehicle. So I wonder if the actual launch mount for super heavy will be a real beast of a ground support equipment, and that's why they're doing these really deep pilings for it right now.
Right.
And I know we've already seen a bit of that on the East Coast. The East Coast launch mount kind of has already started construction, and we've seen the pilings for that already. So we have
Yeah,
an idea what it'll look like.
and the interesting thing about the 39A super heavy thing is Harold, who's one of the KSC guys who's been keeping an eye on it for us. He said that is literally just the base of it, and it will actually extend further. It'll be designed for super heavy in mind straight away. So it's not just a Starship pad at KSC; it's a super heavy pad as well. So that'll be exciting to watch when they get that back into priorities because they're all focused on Boca Chica right now.
Absolutely. And I know there was some recent reports about, because I remember at one point there was NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine who kind of made a comment on Twitter that it was time for the commercial crew companies, especially SpaceX, to deliver, right? They
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that Crew Dragon was SpaceX's #1 priority, right? And then, of course, not that long ago, SpaceX delivered. They delivered 2 NASA astronauts to low Earth orbit, and now they're sitting on the space station, and the Crew Dragon spacecraft is docked to it. So right
And
after that, we saw some reports suggesting that Elon has said, "Okay, we've accomplished the commercial crew goal. We have a new #1 priority now, and that's Starship."
right, I've got a few things to say about that. First of
Okay.
all, Jim Bridenstine was completely correct to say that. Let's face it,
Yeah.
it is a priority. I think even SpaceX would acknowledge the priority several months ago was to end the gap, human spaceflight back to low Earth orbit, to remove the constraint of having to go to Russia to launch their own crews to a station they mainly built. It made no sense. It was a priority for the United States to regain its domestic launch capability. There's no question about it. You can still do these future programs in tandem. The problem with Jim was thinking they're doing too much. The balance wasn't right. They were focusing too much on Starship rather than Crew Dragon because they were having some problems with testing. As soon as he said that, everything went well for SpaceX. But I don't think they reprioritized anything. I think they just had a good run of test results. All with the Mark III parachutes, they all went well. They had the processing go through well. In the end, the vehicle hardware wasn't the launch date constraint. It was paperwork, which was NASA side. So the irony there was NASA was determining the launch date from a readiness standpoint, and of course, it all went well. Now, after it went well, the reporting was saying our priority now is Starship, but it also missed out some key words, saying that in tandem. I think I can't remember the actual quotes. I don't think there's a quote here, but in parallel with making sure we get Bob and Doug home safely. So there was no loss of priority with DM2 until they're home safely. And of course, the priority will also continue on with Crew Launch Vehicle 1. But this is SpaceX. They're not going to just rest on their laurels that they've got Crew Dragon running. They have to get Starship up and running from a business case because this is their future. It's same with Starlink. You can't say they can take priority off Starlink because Starlink is a business case. It's cost them a lot of money right now, and it has to deliver. It's not some pet hobby project they're doing. So I think Jim Bridenstine has been brilliant. He did it with the Marshall Space Flight Center and Boeing. He basically banged on their desk saying, these delays with SLS are not acceptable. So he's done the same thing with SLS, and that's kind of worked. Although Boeing kind of like, yeah, they said yes, Jim, and then Boeing will do what Boeing do. But
Right.
He's a very good man manager. I find he seems to know what buttons to press in public and in private to get the results. I think he's a fantastic administrator.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think your analysis of it's important that now that Demo 2 has launched, they can say, okay, we really do need to have a big priority on the Starship program, but that doesn't mean that they're going to take priority away from the commercial crew side of things, because that's still
Exactly, yeah.
important, and there's still going to be a huge series of crewed missions. Now, this was just the final test flight, not even an operational mission yet, and that's going to continue on for several years. So they're going to have to make sure they maintain their focus there while also bringing Starship online. But that should be exciting to see. I've got some super chats that I want to go through here before we go to our next question. Actually, well, this one is both a super chat and a question, so it works. And we were just mentioned Starlink a little bit. Dougal wants to know what's the highest latitude where Starlink works. We know the eventual plan is global coverage, but that might not be what they have originally. Chris, what are we looking at there?
Oh no, that's a good question. The thing with Starlink is they've got a certain amount of public plans for it, but because they were in a big rival space with OneWeb, which is no longer a case, but
Right.
also still with Amazon's Cupola's constellation, I think they've been very coy about what the actual plans are. So we only know what they're doing so far and their initial overview of the plans, but I wouldn't like to, to define exactly what kind of orbits to be going for. I think the main thing is they're just launching as many as they can right now and getting to a position where they can initiate a constellation and test it.
Right, and I know there's a polar orbiting component to the Starlink constellation,
Yeah,
which should be able to give them pretty much any latitude they need to. So eventually, I think that's where they're getting, but there's going to be some sort of beta access to certain areas of the world, and then they'll like kind of expand that, as they go along, as they get more and more of these satellites up. They're already up to, I think, 418 as of this morning's launch, or something
yep,
like that. Oh,
something like that.
that's so far this year. That doesn't include the ones just last year. I'm remembering the wrong statistic, but hundreds of satellites already up there, but they've only just begun. There's going to be so much more. So, but that's going to be like a sequential kind of progressive forming of the constellation.
There's an interesting little crossover here. Is that they're launching literally about 20 launches a year. I think they're going for with
Mhm.
Starlink. Super Heavy. I keep
Yeah,
remembering someone mentioning Super Heavy could launch a load of Starlinks in one go.
absolutely.
So can you imagine Starlink's launching from Boca Chica? Yesterday's Starship launch of Starlink will take 6,000 Starlinks into
Right.
orbit.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge part because the you have to get permission from the FCC to operate all of these satellites in orbit, and a big part of them getting approval to launch this constellation was you have to get them up by a certain date. You can't take your time getting them up there.
Yeah,
And a big part of that, people said, well, they can get a good start with the Falcon 9 fleet, but you can only launch so many on a single rocket. But if they bring Starship online in a couple of years and they're putting Starlinks on that, and of course, even like the very first demo flights of Starship, they can put Starlink satellites on there. That's an internal payload. You're not risking a customer.
yeah,
So that could be a way for them to meet that deadline and launch tons of satellites at once. And of course, the pressure, like you said, might be a little bit off with OneWeb's bankruptcy, but still, there's other constellations still coming online, and they still want to meet those deadlines. So the Starships with like 1,000 Starlinks, that might be.
mhm.
I don't know what the number, if anyone's come up with a number of how many they could actually launch, but
Yeah. I'd love to know because I think they'll be using that chomper system. I think they call it, where
right,
the front of Starship splits into half like a fairing, but it stays attached, and then basically pushes out the payload.
I
which
keep
they were.
thinking of it as a shuttle payload bay. You know, it
Yeah,
opens
yeah,
up,
it's not
releases a
unlike
payload,
that.
and
Yeah,
closes it back up. Yeah.
so that'd be fantastic to that'd be fantastic to see those launches, especially if they can loot from Boca Chica. I mean, it'll pay for itself straight away because they got two of their
Exactly.
priorities in one go there. So yeah, but it's I'm just still watching these United Rentals trucks running around like crazy. I, we were talking about priorities. I want to bring Mary in on this because we're talking about priorities. Um, when Demo 2 launched, did you notice that Boca Chica slowed down at all, or did it just keep working as normal as if nothing was happening, Mary?
No, I think it did slow down
Ah, there we go.
at
See,
that, yeah, close to the time. Yeah.
because that's important because that just shows that they're a team and that you'll have people in Hawthorne who'll be running on Dragon, be working on Falcon 9, who'll stop and watch tests.
Right.
Maybe even on our webcasts. I know we've had a few of Boca Chica testing because it's still part of the SpaceX family. So it's just nice to know that in Boca Chica with the Starship program, they were all thinking, right, this is our guys. These are Demo 2. We're going to watch this. It's big, huge thing for the United States, but big thing for our company as well. So that's a lovely thing to hear, actually. I don't think we've heard that before. So I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, and I think the satellite tracking dish was in action too.
Oh, yes. The Star, on Stargate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that started
and
with
I
Demo
know,
1, right? And then they've
I
used it
know,
since.
I
yeah,
remember Nomad saying he used to watch the arrays tracking when the dragons were going over. So yeah, that's just amazing that they go over that trajectory,
yeah.
don't
And
they? So,
today the one was moving
all
around.
right.
Yeah, and I'm assuming Starlink launch.
So then,
I don't
yes,
know.
yeah, it must be then. If it was tracking, it was the Starlink launch, and I thought we only really knew they were tracking dragons. So that's interesting as well that they're actually using it for more than just dragon launches.
That is very interesting.
Yeah,
We have another super chat here. Rman24 wants to thank the mods for their work. So it's not just the talking heads that you're hearing now, me, Mary, and Chris, but we've also got Michael Baylor working behind the scenes, as well as a whole team of moderators in chat who send us your questions and super chats. And it takes the whole team to make this happen. So we greatly appreciate that super chat and thank you for the support. A question from Future Martian for you, Mary. Where do they put the aero services that arrived yesterday? I think we saw some canards or something like that.
Yeah, and I just happened, of course, I like to try to catch things, um, to see where they're being put, and those were actually put off of Remedios Road or Avenue. I'm not sure which it is, but um, to the left of it, where the old Mark One fins are. It was beyond that. But yeah, I just happened to go out and I happened to see the crane in action and checked it out and happened to get a video of it. But yeah, that was cool to see.
I like the names have been given. Ailerons.
Oh,
Elanerons,
really?
yeah.
Aileronerons, yeah. But
Oh,
I think Tim Dodd's explanation of them, he quoted Mary's photograph, and he said they're called air brakey flappy wing things.
It'll be interesting
yeah.
to see how exactly they use them, and I want to get some speculation here. I'm wondering what SN number those will finally come in, because we're still waiting for a Starship prototype to make a 150-meter short up and down hop test, which doesn't need any aerodynamic services. But once you start going higher, you're going to need those, and so we're thinking SN5 does what SN4 was supposed to do, a really nice
Yeah.
short hop. And then if that goes well, SN6 gets a nose cone and fins and stuff like that. What do you think?
Well,
Predictions?
I,
Wild
I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna give my predictions and let Mary correct me because Mary will know better than I will. I think SN7's really not helped because we were working in progression and SN7's now a test tank, so we'll have to forget about SN7 naming cycles here. But I would say you're right. SN5 will do what SN4 was supposed to do, which was a 150-meter hop, and it got so close. It did so well. SN4. It got further than any other Starship. They got through all the static fires with two different Raptors as well, which is no mean feat, which is another first. I think SM5 will do the 150-meter hop What will happen after that? I don't know, because if SM5 performs very well, there's no reason why they couldn't go a bit higher with SM5. But the
True.
fact they got SN6 in the high bay already to be stacked literally right now makes me think that might be a design further on, and that's the one to do a 20-kilometer hop. Why have they got the canyards there? It's another thing that makes me think that a future Starship, be it probably SN6, will get a nose cone, and if SN6 gets a nose cone, that's your 20-kilometer hop vehicle, I think. What do you think, Mary?
That sounds about right, I think. Yeah.
Wasn't
I
there a hint of maybe an intermediate hop before the 20-kilometer hop?
Yeah,
as well?
that's why I'm thinking SM5 might do more than just 150-meter hop. I'm thinking if a 150-meter hop goes well with SM5, they might go intermediate and then do SN6 with the big 20-kilometer, which is technically a hop, but it's a very big hop. But that's going to do the 20 kilometers where they're going to come down, landing on like a belly flop landing
Yeah.
as designed. So that needs the canyards. So that's why I'm thinking nose cone and canyards, SN6. Let SM5 do the intermediate hops. That makes kind of more sense to me, but plans change all the time, so you never really can keep an idea. The thing that catches me out though is this 304L steel. When
Yeah.
Mary showed us those stickers and those, I love how they're drawn on the side of the actual barrels. It really helps. I wonder if that steel, that 304L steel, is the ones they're going to go orbital with. So they can do all of the mechanical testing, they can do all the aerodynamic testing of how the hop, how the land, how the legs come out, how they can literally bring them back and land on their feet on the pad with SM5, SN6. SN7 is going to test the 304L steel, see how it performs with cryoproofing or whatever. SN8, which is the barrels we're probably seeing right now, which Mary took some videos of recently, the last few days. That could be SN8, that could be the orbital vehicle. So that's where I'm thinking I'm going a bit further down the line. I'm pushing my luck there by guessing, but that's what I assume might be the case.
Yeah, I brought up because someone was asking in chat, are there any signs of SN8? And Mary, you have seen SN8 hardware, yeah?
Mhm.
I do believe so, yes. I haven't seen anything with a sticker on it yet.
And of course, as soon
I
as you
like
said
it.
that, someone, as soon as you said that, Mary, someone will Boca Chica will be listening and go, right, we'll put a sticker on it for tonight.
There you go.
Yeah, I
Uh,
like it when they label things.
Right,
Yeah.
it makes it easier, right?
It's ironic though. I've noticed a few times now that as soon as we've gone, I wonder what section this is for. Which one's this for? And the next day, Mary's taking a picture. They put a little sticker on it, saying SN7 forward section. Thinking that's a bit of a coincidence.
Yeah.
Another super chat from Sinclair. What will we expect to see this test stand do? And thanks, Mary. So, of course, thank you to Mary for giving us all our live coverage of this, and thank you for the super chat for helping support her. This test stand, what are we expecting to see from this?
I couldn't hear there the loud.
I think they're just asking about this testing that we're looking at now. Are we expecting, we're probably expecting SN5 to use it. Are we expecting that to get more use forward? And what's the big plan for the brand new test stand?
Oh, SN5, SN6,
Pretty much every
SN8.
right, all the Starship prototypes that aren't the test tank, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's always possible we'll see additional test tanks because it sounds like, I mean, from what we saw, we had SN5, SN6 kind of in the getting ready and getting stacked in various degrees of production. And then SN4 had its failure. And did we see makings of the SN7 test tank before that happened? Or do we think they said, oh, we want to test something before we move
Oh,
on to SN5?
I do believe that stand came from the super heavy launch site area. They had it already for the
What about,
SN7 test tank.
okay, so they were already starting to make that. So maybe that decision came before, but
Yeah, I'm trying to think back myself. I think it was before. But the thing that strikes me is that picture Mary tweeted. I'm going to put it. I'm going to put it into chat. That picture Mary tweeted of SM5 leaving the high bay. To me, I don't know if it's lighting or if it's just a sunny day or whatever. It's always a sunny day, don't it? It just looks so much better. It really does strike me as looking so much better than SM4. I don't know how that works mechanically. I don't know how that works structurally, but it just looks better. I've put it in chat now. Have a quick on that, everybody, and tell me if that vehicle doesn't look better than SM4. I think it does look a lot stronger, a lot more smoother, never mind shinier than SM4. So I think I've got great hopes for SM5.
Is that related to the new? Because we know they're experimenting with some different alloys of stainless steel. Do we think SN5 had a different alloy than SN4, or is it a different construction method? Like,
Now
what do you think the difference are?
I think it's different construction. I think the alloy's the same. I think it's still the same steel, but I think they've used a robotic welder a lot more.
Okay.
Yeah, because Mary's taking pictures, and it's sometimes you can see it when you're blowing. Because Mary takes great pictures, you can actually expand them and see the actual writing on them, where it says robotic weld, robotic weld, robotic weld, and that's
Oh,
what
there you go.
that might be more of the case now. They've gone from that hand welding, they've gone from that machine that was pumping out rings and making a mess of some of the rings to these robotic welders inside the tents, and they're making a big difference.
I
They're
was
on a
surprised to see that the access holes were already sealed and welded closed.
And that'll help. I mean,
Both
that's obviously going to help as well, isn't it? So, I mean, that's going to be structurally better. So, that's probably just lessons learned. That is why they're testing. They're going to find these faults, going to find ways of fixing it, and then make it better for the next version. So, I've got a lot of hope for SM5. I really do.
We have a question. Well, first of all, I'm trying to get through more super chats again. If you put in a super chat in or a chat question, we've got a queue in front of me here, and I'm pulling them up as we kind of get to them. So if we don't get to it right away, I promise it's in the queue, and we will get to it. We had a super chat from Adam, $10. Thank you so much for your support. We have a super chat question from GVA Morning Show. How's SN5 doing out in the open and the nose cones? So SM5 has been moved out of the high bay and is now sitting out, getting ready to roll to the pad? Question mark. Well, what's the status there?
I think
Well-
we'll let Mary answer that one.
Well, it's out of the high bay and it looks great. I was thrilled to see it today, and we'll see how soon it can roll to the pad.
Has there been any signs of workers preparing to roll it, or are they not quite there yet? Probably waiting for
No.
SM7.
No, the roll lift or their transporters are out from underneath it, and so apparently it's not going to happen right away.
Right. So they just moved it out of the high bay and set it down there, and they're not
Yeah.
going to roll it to the pad just yet.
No, and probably that way they can get SN6 in there and stack.
Gotcha. And
And you know what the fun thing about that is, they can now stack SN6, but they can also start stacking SN8.
right.
Which is because
That's
it's going to blow
probably-
your mind. We're going to have SN5 going to the launch pad. We've got SN6 in the high bay. We've got SN7 test tank out at the launch site. We're going to have SN8 inside the high bay. We're going to start to see SN9 sections probably rolling around in the production area near the tents. It's just crazy. I've never known anything like this in anything we've covered before.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of all the
Yeah.
the sections.
And it's interesting because people always say like SpaceX is moving at this blistering pace, which they are, but it's hard to get a bit of a reference because we don't really have another program to compare it to because we never really get to see this part of rocket development before. It's always behind closed doors and in test facilities, like in the middle of a desert where there's no cameras or live streams or anything like that. This
Yep.
is kind of new territory for people who are following rocket development programs, and people say, oh, SpaceX keeps, the Starship prototypes keep failing. This is expected and a normal part of rocket development. When you build prototypes, you kind of expect most of them to fail, because that's how you learn things and gain more data and improve your design. So it's interesting to see, it's pretty evident that this is a very fast development pace. But I'm wondering if part of that isn't just we're waiting. We don't really have another pace to compare it to because normally when we see the first hardware from a new development program, it's already gotten past this stage of development. Is that fair, or what do you think?
I do, because I think we've got another example coming up with Blue Origin and their new Glenn vehicle. We know they're going to put a structural test vehicle into that structural test stand, which is pretty much visible from local areas, but they're not. I don't think they're all that too pleased about that. I think they want to do that in private if they could, because Blue Origin's very much a very secretive company. Not from a secretive as in we're not going to, we don't want anyone to watch us. They're secretive as in they're still in the mindset of being a new space tourism company, that they want to sell their product more than anything else, and they don't really want to be too much in the public eye as such. And they're going to have to basically break that structural vehicle in this test stand, and it'll just look pretty bad. But of course, SLS did that as well, and
Right.
SLS on Twitter luckily put it onto Twitter and said, "Look, this was designed. We did this on purpose. It looks a
Right.
mess, but that's what we're designing for." I don't know how Blue Origin are going to do that. They're going to be quite scared about how the public will see it, but hopefully they'll be open enough to talk to the media and let us do the job of saying this is a test of failure on purpose, and
Mhm.
that's why you're seeing a new Glenn in bits right now. It's because that was designed to be the case. But talking about timelines and pace and things like that, remember, Blue Origin's New Glenn has been in the planning for several years now, and they've still not got an actual test vehicle yet. So that's a pace we're looking at there, where there is nothing like Starship. I cannot remember any program to compare it to that would come close to being comparable with this test cycle of vehicles at Starship. So I think it is unique. I think it is special. I think it is something that we're not used to seeing, and I don't think we'll see again from any other company in the near term future. And that's why it's exciting.
Absolutely. And we saw both SLS and Starship do destructive tests on purpose, and that's a big part of rocket development. And anyone who's been to the Kennedy Space Center visitor complex know what Blue Origin facility we're talking about. It's the giant one right across the street from the parking lot.
Yeah.
And they've got this huge vertical test stand that they're gonna test to failure a New Glenn stage in. And so it's gonna be pretty hard to hide that from the public. So hopefully they come out and say, hey, we did this test. It was on purpose, and let us share that and share that. Hey, this means New Glenn's closer to flying, stuff like that.
I wouldn't be surprised to put a massive curtain saying Amazon on, put it up 500 feet in the air saying, "This could advert for Amazon. This just don't look behind the curtain. Do not look behind the curtain."
I hope not, but wouldn't put it past them. We've got a couple more super chats. Sinclair again with a super chat and a membership. Welcome to a channel membership. Another way to support the channel. We greatly appreciate that. And then Jared with a $20 super chat. Huge shout out to all NSF members. Yes, absolutely. Thank you to those who give your support to support the channel. It's how we get to share all of this cool news coverage and share Starship testing and all of this other stuff with you guys. And be excited about these new spaceflight programs. We've got a huge queue of questions, so let's do some rapid fire max Q&A. What do you think? Does that sound good?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, we got a quick question from Michael asking about the flare stack. Did they get rid of it? Mary, where's the flare stack?
I think Mary's gone to look for it.
I think we saw it get removed, right?
Yeah, I can answer that. Basically, the flare stack was pretty damaged from the SM4 RUD, so that was quite unfortunate for it. But it was always going to be at end of its life, because Elon before SM4's testing was saying they were going to go to like some solar power condensing
Right.
method of dealing with the methane. So that was always going to happen. I think SM4 knocking it off its hinges kind of just accelerated that process. So that has been removed, and we're not going to see a flare stack now for testing, which is a shame, because it was one of the indicators. We had the big flare stack just before the static fires, which gave away we're like a minute away from it. But we'll still have the sirens all being well, so at least we'll know we're 10 minutes ago they're going to do a static fire test with it.
Right. Another question, and here's a good discussion point from Stephen Clark. Do you think the loss of Raptor SN20 was a bigger loss than losing SN4?
Uh,
Any thoughts?
They're not cheap. They're not cheap engines, but I think they were prepared to. In a test program, you're going to account for potential loss of engines. It was one engine. They're up to. Did Elon say recently it looked like SM40 or something like that? They're going through the Raptors testing at McGregor, and they're going to be able to produce them at a rate of at least one a week, probably one every, maybe 2 or 3 a week. At some point, they're going to need so many Raptors for super heavy that I think the economy of scale means that it's just another handy test marker where they can see, what happens to these engines. SN18 had a good test firing, but it wasn't right for the following test firing. So they put SN20 in there. SN20 did very well. They got a lot of data off it. So it would have earned its keep in that respect. And just obviously with the destruction of it, it's just one of those things. I think they're just going to expect these things in testing. That's why they test.
Absolutely. And Mary, I believe we've got you back on comms. Can
Yeah,
you hear us now?
yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, perfect, because I've got a question for you. J Gaming and Tech wants to know, how does SN7, the test tank, connect to the tank farm? Is there new GSE at that new location? How's that set up?
I can't really see how they've set it up, but don't they just run lines?
Yeah, they must have, because Mary, you said it was at a new location at the launch site, right?
Yeah, right.
So they will have already, or they will, prior to testing, have to run some propellant lines, or it might even
Right.
not be propellant, it might just be nitrogen lines to the test tank in order to hook
And
that
I'm
up.
not sure if that's what they were doing. They were moving a piece of the insulated pipe um, around the other side of the launch mount. I saw. So I don't know if that would be for part of it.
That's the important thing to mention, though, the fact that SN4 didn't actually fail. It wasn't SN4's fault. It was a quick disconnect
Right.
test which went wrong, and they said it had a leak, and a leak combusted, and that's what blew the whole thing up. So I think that's another indicator that they probably might do some quick disconnect testing with SN7 to see how it just basically works out better. They're not getting leaks, then they can just apply that to SN5 when they bring it to the mount. So the old GSC question will be to see what they do with SN7 first, hopefully being the first thing to be tested out there in the coming days, and see if we know anything different from that.
Okay, another super chat from Fortnite Sinclair. Thank you so much for the support. We love Mary. Let's get her a taco van. Thank you so much for your support. We'll make sure we hook Mary up. Here's a question from Noah. What is the time frame for Starship testing for SN7 as well as the SN5 hop? Do we have a latest time frame on that?
Well, I think there's testing scheduled for Monday, Tuesday, and possibly Wednesday. The times, I think it started at 8 a.m., 8 till, I'm not sure, 8
Yeah,
till 5.
Michael's actually just pushed up on screen. 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. starting on Monday. And
Yeah,
that would have to be SN7 then, right?
that's what I'm assuming it must be for.
Yeah, the way I see this is this is for SN7, and as soon as they complete a test with SN7, they'll cancel the other they'll cancel the other closures and do a
Right,
rollout window, won't they? Like where they can roll it down the highway.
right.
All right. Quick new member, Diane, has joined the channel. Thank you so much for your membership. We appreciate the support. We have a question. Do you think it will be possible to achieve a smoother surface with less wrinkles and seams? Will it be like the renderings in the end? We think it's gotten better recently, right? Like recent prototypes are getting more smooth and less wrinkles in the steel and things like that.
Right. They've definitely look a lot better than what they used to. So I guess there's always room for improvement.
Chris, what do you think? They're gonna get
Yeah,
that even better?
I really do. I think Mary was best answering that because she sees them with her own eyes. We're looking through photos and video, which is just as good, but it's not as good as seeing it with your own eyes. And you can see the difference between. Remember the one that Elon did his presentation with, that Mark One? It was a wrinkly vehicle. It really
Right,
was.
yeah.
And we were all saying it's okay once they pressurize it, the creases will go, because we were just trying to find reasons to kind of associate that vehicle on show with the renders. The renders are smooth, lovely, smooth,
Right.
silky skin, stainless steel vehicles. But now we're starting with SM5, which I was bringing up earlier. It's starting to look that way now. We're still getting the rings. We're still starting to see the little dimples and whatever now and again. But I think we're getting there. And I think by the time we get to the orbital vehicle, it'll be much, much more like the actual renders.
And I think that it's looking back now that we've seen the new vehicles, and now looking back and seeing a picture of the Mark One, it looks
Yeah,
way worse than it did at the time
yeah, it does.
because we've
Yeah,
seen what they're really supposed to look like.
that
Mhm.
really was a lawn ornament.
But of course, without building that vehicle, they wouldn't have learned how to do it better. So it was an
Yep.
important step along the way. Mary, he's probably a question from you. Thomas wants to know how many people are now working in Boca Chica, more or less than 50?
Oh, definitely way more. More.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think? Couple hundred?
Oh, I think even more than that. They're, I want to say more like 500.
It's hard to get a good grasp because you kind of always focus on one area of the Boca Chica. Like right now, we're looking at just the launch site, but there's whole other areas to the complex, the production facility, and there's huge parking lots that are always full of cars and people that are working.
I remember
Right.
Mary's great. Every now and again, Mary does a roll by video, but it's like a drive by,
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
she does a great job keeping the camera level above the registration plates. So this, but you can see all the car windows, and you're thinking, God, there's so many cars, and they're all parked outside. They're not even parked in the main car park. They're on the road. So you're thinking,
They
how many
don't
cars are
actually have
there?
enough parking.
Yeah, literally, just must be hundreds and hundreds of people there.
Yeah, there is. Some days you
uh,
hardly see anyone outside though.
Yeah.
They're all working inside the
and the
tents and
tents. Yeah.
buildings. Yeah. But yeah, it's busy.
A question here from Adam about nose cones. We know we saw one nose cone that had some integrated like RCS thrusters, the control thrusters. Have we spotted any additional nose cones with those same systems or just the one?
Trying to think. There's another nose cone that was not quite as high as that one, but I can't remember if it had thrusters on it or not.
I can, because I remember editing that video. It was the big one, the one we've seen
Yeah,
with the which is in view now, and there's a smaller one which you've mentioned, and that has the same little 3 little holes or 4 holes
it
in it.
does.
So yeah, there's 2 of them now with that, but that's like a baby nose cone.
Right. And then there was the baby, which has grown, and then there's another baby, I think. So there's at least 4 in the works.
Who thought we'd be looking back saying we talk about growing nose cones?
Yeah.
Right. Let's see. More questions. Here's a question about lunar plans. We know NASA is working with SpaceX now to use these starships to land people and cargo on the moon. And a question about would a lunar landing mission require 3 starships, a lunar starship, a storage starship, and a starship tanker? Chris, you want to take that one maybe?
Yeah. I think the tanker starship is mainly for beyond Earth orbit to Mars. I think it would depend on the payload mass because I have a funny feeling they could do a Starship launch with certain payloads direct. I wouldn't like to put my neck on the line and say that's the case, but I think we're looking at 2 starships. Now, the retanker one could be if they want the Starship back, because I am thinking more along the lines of launching a Starship and leaving it on the moon, because that's what
Right.
SpaceX want to do. They want to start building some bases. It's called Moon Base Alpha. So you want to land your hardware there and use the hardware as a base of operations. I think you could maybe do direct in that sense. If they want the Starship back, yeah, I think we're looking at a tanker Starship. But again, it's a simple architecture they're thinking of, where you refuel in orbit. The actual refueling itself will be something they're going to learn and do properly. It'll take a few times before they get it right. But the concept of it is fantastic because it just adds more capability to use the actual vehicle. I would be thinking 1 to 2 for the lunar plans, but my mind is wandering because I'm thinking back to the comment we made about Jim Bridenstine talking about priorities and focus SpaceX. It's now wanting Starship to work because Starship is now integral to the moon plans. I can imagine a tweet from Jim Bernstein in a few months' time saying, "Concentrate on Starship. We've got to get to the
Right,
moon."
yeah.
Yeah, so that's why my mind was wandering when we're talking about tankers and stuff, because I'm thinking there's an amazing kind of like curve going on here where Jim Bernstein trying to balance everything to his both his NASA aims and the political aims, and the political aims include the moon big time. You know, so I can see some cheerleading of Starship going on in the next few months.
That's a good point. We have a quick super chat from Bubinski, a longtime NetSpace supporter. Is the brown and white piece in the foreground the new launch pad? That's the new launch mount at the Boca Chica launch facility, right? Did I get the naming right?
Yeah, this will be for Mary because Mary will know that there's a launch mount there we're looking at right now for Starship. There's a landing pad next to that for Starship. There's a super heavy area where they're going to build the launch mount, and there's a super heavy a super heavy landing pad. So it's technically four, isn't it? It's two for Starship, two for super heavy, Mary.
That's what I would assume that they would do, is to have the super heavy launch mount or launch, yeah, area with the landing pad also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't think they would use the same landing pad, would they?
No, but the funny thing is, I'm thinking back to the video, the CGI video they put out around the time of the presentation in Boca Chica, and they showed Super Heavy's booster landing right next to the launch mount, which by then was a launch tower.
Wow.
But yeah, it literally lands next door because then they can just literally crane it from the launch tower back onto the launch mount, refuel it, which is just brilliant. I love the idea of seeing that happen because originally they were going to land back on the launch mount, but that's really pushing your luck. You've got to be precision landing there. But launching near the launch mount itself and then craning it back onto the launch mount would be a great thing to see.
Yeah, I'm curious about that because, like you said, the original plan was to land on the launch pad, and when
Mm.
they gave that animation that showed that's we're going to land right next to it and we'll move it back over, I'm wondering if there's any reason to evolve from that back to landing directly on the launch mount. You're already going to have the crane there, so unless the vehicle itself maybe gets way bigger and it's not really feasible to use a crane to move it, then maybe you reconsider landing back on the launch mount. But otherwise, no reason they can't just continually crane it back onto the mount once it lands, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's again, I think SpaceX's own videos show that they're evolving the plan all the time. And we've got Lars Blackmore. He's now moved from Falcon 9 landing to super heavy landing at SpaceX, and the guy's a genius. He's English as well, which helps. But he really is. He's the guy. Him and Trip Harris were the two people who really, really trained the Falcon 9 to land precision landings. And with Lars now moving to Starship, I wonder if he'll be going for some kind of evolved plan with landing because he knows he can do it. He knows he can train these vehicles to do precision landing, and that might bring what you're suggesting back onto the table. But I think maybe for the first few launches, at least, they'll be looking just to get them back onto their feet close by, and that'll be a success, and they can evolve the precision from there.
We had a couple super chats, new memberships actually for the channel. Alan, Not a Bob 7, and Thomas. Thank you so much for your new memberships. We greatly appreciate the support. We also have a super chat question from DD View. So much steel delivered to the new 81-meter high bay 2 site. Mary, what's the latest on the new high bay?
Well, I've seen a lot of deliveries, yeah, with sections for the high bay, but I'm not quite sure that they've actually started construction on it yet.
So
Because
just delivering the materials so far.
Right, from what I've seen. I'm not sure, yeah, exactly where it's going.
yeah, we've looked at the aerial photographs recently taken by RGV Photography, and he's showing. I don't know if it was drawn on, but it was a real live view of the area. But there seems to be an area where it could go, and we've got artists working on rendering a precision high bay at 81 meters into those shots. So hopefully we'll have an article very soon. I say with Michael listening on the super heavy high bay, which would be just amazing to see.
Question about SN7 I'm sorry, I can't speak. SN7 testing. Does the SN7 test tank have a new steel alloy?
Yes, it does. It's the 304L. And Mary took some pictures of the rings as they were, because we didn't know what the SN7 was about. We were confused by the domes. We were wondering why they were flipping a certain dome. We were like wondering why they had it out there in such a strange configuration. Of course, it's a test tank, and that's where we found it was a test tank. But while they were doing that, we were seeing 304L written on the side. Am I right, Mary? I think I remember that correctly. It's got 304L written onto the rings.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And yeah, because that was the reason why we figured they were doing a test tank, was to test the new stainless steel
Yeah.
welds.
Gotcha. And Mary, I see we're talking in our back channel here about maybe pivoting to see a view of the build site. What do you want to do there?
Well, I just thought, since they had the SN6 thrust section out, and the SN5 is out of the high bay, and the nose cone and the 5-ring stack fairing section, it might be a lovely view.
Mary, you had me at SN6.
Micah, what do you need us to do to make this happen?
Mary, how do you want to do this? Do you want us to cut away to another scene? Do you want us to leave it live while you drive? We can do either way.
I think it's probably best to cut to something else, and
Okay, cool.
it shouldn't take, very long to get up there, and everything. I'll just leave everything set up, and it'll just be a quick adjustment on the camera, hopefully, and we should be good to go.
Okay, so we will give that a try then. What I'm going to do, chat, is cut us to a black screen, and then we're going to put up some images for Chris B and Thomas to talk about while Mary's in transport. So we'll keep talking and answering your questions while Mary relocates to the build site, and then we will continue our live images. So that sounds good with everybody else.
Sounds like a plan.
I don't know,
Okay.
Chad. Do you want to see the Starship build site? I don't know if you guys are interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think they are.
All right, so we'll cut away real quick while Mary changes her view, but we can certainly keep answering questions. We've got a couple here. We don't really need to see a live view or anything to talk about this. So, Chris, questions about if the Starship fins will have heat tiles on them for reentry.
Oh, that's a good question. That is a good question. You see, the reason why I'm thinking maybe not is the grid fins on Falcon 9 boosters. You think one of the hottest areas on a Falcon 9 coming back is the aft, which has got a heat shield for the engines, and the grid fins. But they burn up, and they've got no protection of titanium. Now, these are steel, so I wonder if they will need some heat tails on it, because they will heat up pretty well. So it's a question of how they react, how they actuate, how they move, how they position themselves during re-entry. Because I remember back to the shuttle. I'm going to bring shuttle up every time I'm on a live show. I'm going to bring it up now. The space shuttle would re-enter and do literally like banks, big-esque banks, and curve through the atmosphere to slow down. That's the aerodynamic drag and basically slowing your vehicle down. And one side would be very, very cool. One side would be very, very hot. And that's why a shuttle's wing leading edge had special protection, the RCC, and the TPS tiles, the black tiles were all the heat protection. But the other side was white because he didn't need it. It had thermal blankets, but that was mainly for when they're in orbit, to keep the vehicle at a temperature range while it was in orbit. Not all of Starship will get very hot. That's the whole point. So it's a question of, will they put heat tiles on one side? That is my question. Will they put TPS on one side of these canyards and leave the other side bare? So I don't know, but that was my way of trying to explain to myself, thinking maybe just one side will get TPS.
Yeah, that would make sense to me, but and just picturing the canards kind of sticking out during reentry, I think not putting any tiles at all on them would be dangerous. So it sounds like, having them on like the windward side, I think is what they've called it.
There we go.
So the side facing reentry would make the most sense, but you don't necessarily need them on the other side.
I
A
think
question,
that's a
another.
bit. Sorry, the big thing is we are guessing that we get tidbits from Elon now and again when he answers questions, and he gives things away. But we found that those plans also change, and as you'd expect with a test program, these plans change. Starship has changed dramatically from the first renders, from the first presentation in Boca Chica. It's changed dramatically, and that's what will always happen. So we can only go on our best guess and what we're seeing right now, and hopefully Elon will trickle out information on his Twitter feed because he's the only way SpaceX will talk about it. SpaceX officially will not talk about Starship apart from on official broadcasts where it's designed to bring in Starship into the conversation. So we are working on tidbits, working on guesses, and the rest is just conjecture.
And we have another question about those same heat tiles. If Starship could get to an orbital flight without the heat tiles, thoughts?
It could, but it's all about testing. You want to see how things react. That's where they put the little TPS tiles on SM4 even, which wasn't going to go
Right.
anywhere near orbit. They want to see how these tiles react, not just in the regimes of heating, but also in the regimes of vibration, of the cryogenic fuel in the vehicle. They want to see how these tiles, because one tile popped off, remember, on SM4.
Right. Yes.
So that was a good test. And that vehicle was never going to, that vehicle was only planned to go 150 meters. It was not going to get anywhere near orbit.
Mhm.
So I think it's more a question of will they do it to see how the tiles react in different conditions, not just heating. And that makes me think they will put tiles on it regardless. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think I concur with that. You could certainly, I mean, if there was some problem with heat tile like development, it's easy enough to reach orbit without a heat shield. But if you want to come back without the heat shield, then it becomes a bit problematic. So
Yeah.
I think
I,
they're,
I,
and
I
especially
do think
since.
I do think there'll be some shuttle guys working for space. I know for a fact there's some shuttle guys working for SpaceX because I know them who'll be shouting at whoever's designing Starship, the Starship program, saying, "Please, whatever you do, make sure your tiles stay on." Because the shuttle program knows all too well about how TPS can fall off a vehicle and how dramatic an effect, without getting into too grim circumstances, how dramatic that effect can be. So I think they will be doing as much testing with the tiles at the TPS as much as possible.
All right, and we will continue going to some questions in a little bit. For those who are maybe just tuning in a little later in the show, Mary is currently moving her camera. We had a live view of the launch site, and she's now moving towards the production area. Get another view of the other side of Boca Chica right now. And while she's moving away, we actually have something else that we're gonna give a quick sneak peek on
Ooh,
screen. Uh,
merchandise.
Merchandise. A lot of people have been asking, when are we going to have NASA spaceflight shirts and things like that? Well, we've been working on it for a little bit, and we've got a bit of a sneak peek here. Those of you who are members of the channel, who have the membership level, and I forget which membership level, I think it's 2 or 3 levels up, that gets you access to our Discord channel. If you are in that Discord, you have seen the link to this store. But we're starting to play with a little bit of merchandise and things about Boca Chica and rockets and all of this cool stuff. And this will certainly be expanded in the future. We're kind of doing a soft launch right now.
Yeah.
But if you want to get a sneak peek early, the YouTube membership would get you access to this store. But then sooner, once we get the soft launch kind of underway, this will be expanded and made more public, and people can order merchandise to support. And again, there's just another way to support that NASA spaceflight team, and allow us to bring you all of this news coverage and stuff like that.
And
So a
a
quick.
few words, because I started this site in 2005, and we had a store to start with. Would you believe it? It's a Cafe Press store. If anyone remembers what they were like, they were quite horrendous, but they did the job. This is a proper store. We didn't want to put a store online for years because we wanted it to be right. And Mark, our webmaster, is integrated into the actual website itself, so it's gonna be a real proper professional store. And we're looking to do unique things like you've seen Orange Rocket Good, because that was a fun thing we always talk about on Twitter about the SLS fans and what have you. So it's just little things like that. It's unique to us. It's unique to the coverage, unique to the fan base, unique to the community, rather than just doing there's a store full of NASA logos on
Right.
T-shirts like everyone else does, because not everybody else, but the non-space sites do that. So we're going for unique, we're going for fun, and the community will also be giving testimonials on how their shipping works and how the product looks. Do little photographs. They can submit ideas to what we're going to put on next. We'll expand the store based on demand of an idea. We'll have our artists, our Matt Crawford, people like that, working on special designs, like the Orange Rocky Good is one of his designs. It's just using the community to bring what the community wants and put it in the store, and then the profit from that store, which won't be a lot, but it'll be something, will go back into the coverage we're providing, because it goes back into the company account, which we use to pay for all this bandwidth and all the people, expenses and what have you. So it's a very circular way of running a store that benefits everybody. And yeah, I think I've said all I need to say that right now without going on too much. Because Mary said she's ready, so I want to shut up.
Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
a sneak peek at what's to come. Mary, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Well, hey.
Uh,
I hope
Michael,
you can.
flip the switch.
Yeah. Hopefully we have.
You may have noticed that our normal.
I'm not saying it yet. I'm still working on it.
All right, we're still working on that. You may have noticed that.
Mary, do you have numbers yet?
Let me see.
No, as soon as I start talking, they're gonna. I don't want to talk over the technical talk, but
I was thinking the same thing.
you may be noticing we're doing this without our usual studio host DOS.
Okay, we have video. We have video.
Setup.
Well, hey,
Oh.
we've got video.
They're ready to move the engine section here.
Wow, we
Here we
might
go.
see this live,
And
everybody.
It's starting to move. Yeah.
There we
Oh,
go.
my
We
word.
see it.
I'm going to take some
Wow.
pictures.
Well, there we have it. So we're now looking at the production area side of the Boca Chica complex, and that is the SN6 engine section that we're looking at right now. And it's right outside that first high bay. We know they're building a second one, but it's not ready yet. This is just the first one.
Yeah, I'm just going to tweet this because it's a live view and it's an event. So if everyone just excuse me for a second, we do some tweeting.
All right. I can answer a couple questions in super chats. First of all, Arman24 with a new membership. Thank you so much for your support. Questions about, oh yeah, we were talking about orbital flights a little bit earlier, and Brian wants to ask if they would need super heavy before they go orbital. The answer to that is yes. It is technically possible for a Starship without a super heavy booster to go to orbit, but it can't bring any payload with it and it can't come back. So there's no point in really doing it that way. So yes, they're gonna need to build a super heavy booster before they attempt their first orbital test flight. So that answers that question. Thunderwork, the thing in the middle. All right, so in our previous view, you saw the new test stand, and the thing you saw in the middle, yes, was the thrust simulator. Basically a thing that applies force on the bottom of a Starship prototype while they're testing it and simulates the force of a Raptor engine firing without actually having to put a Raptor engine on there. So that's what you were looking at there. All right.
And my tweet has just gone out, so we should get a few more people into here now. I'm thinking, wow, we've actually seen this live.
Let's see more. Again, keep putting questions in the chat and we'll try and answer them. Any news about Super Heavy? Well, we just discussed that they're going to need that for the first orbital test flight. Have we seen any hardware that we might think is bound for Super Heavy yet, or what's the deal there?
I think Mary's going to have to take pictures.
Yeah,
I remember her
Mary's out
saying,
taking
yeah,
pictures.
she's literally gone back to a documentary mode where she knows that she's not going to miss any crane action whatsoever. That is what I tell you what. I've had messages from Mary at all hours of the day saying a crane is moving, and that's been like, I'm out there. I'm going to take pictures and video of it. She has not missed, and I don't think she's missed any event at all, and she's not going to miss this one. So I think we'll talk about this. But the question was, can you repeat the question? And I'll try and answer it.
They're
Thomas.
just asking about any news about Super Heavy. What's the latest on that
All
front?
right.
We've seen lots of Starship prototypes. What about Super Heavy?
We haven't seen anything for Super Heavy yet, but again, going back to those aerial photographs, we saw so many rings, so many steel rings out there. And I was thinking, there's that many rings. It reminded me of the view from Coca in Florida, where they stopped production, but they had so many rings. We're thinking that can't just be for Starships. We were thinking maybe they're going to do a super heavy stack, at least a test stack, and see how it performed as a stack structurally more than anything else. And they do have that many rings. You start thinking that, but again, how many rings are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There's about 30 rings on view in this picture alone. So that's a lot of rings. Now, super heavy is how many rings? About that many rings. So I think we're just looking at Starships for now. And super heavy will be 3 or 4L. And we might see larger barrel sections. So if we see like an 8-ring barrel, that will tell us the super heavy's coming.
All right. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to that because the number of Raptors that are going to get on a super heavy stack is
Well,
insane.
I know Elon said they're going to start with super heavy with less Raptors than the
Right.
30 odd. So yeah, at least we say less Raptors. We've seen with the power of 1 Raptor on a static fire,
And that's all we've really seen. We haven't seen multiple Raptors firing at once yet.
That was just 1 Raptor. So you can imagine what multiple Raptors, never mind, a super heavy amount of Raptors will be like. It'll be, you want to be a distance away from that one.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen what it looks like. They did mount 3 Raptors on a Starship for sort of testing of how to install the engines and things like that, but they didn't actually fire all 3. We've only seen them fire the 1 at a time. And that's just on Starship. Super Heavy's going to have 30 odd Raptors at one point. So that's just going to be a whole nother level, and we're a ways off from getting there, but it'll probably happen sooner than we think.
I think the question is when. A lot of people keep asking when will Super Heavy launch. I think it's all determined on how Starship does in the test launches. I think we're looking definitely after the first orbital launch of Starship. We're definitely after that. But Elon's got these plans, haven't he? He's got so many plans for the tourism side of using Starship, especially with the Japanese investor. And the Japanese investor is paying, I can't pronounce his name, so I won't even try. He's paying milestones payments towards the Starship development as part of the deal he did with Elon Musk. So we know that the 150-meter hop with Starhopper was a payment milestone. So that was why it was the success was not just for the Raptor, not just for Starhopper. It was to progress the program to a milestone payment. So I wonder what the next milestone payment is going to be for. I don't think for the 150-meter hop with Starship, it'll probably be the orbital test launch. So there's some giddy up and there's some hurry up and rush attitude towards it, but not to the point that they end up failing badly, that it puts them back 7 months, because that's not what they want. They want to be able to test, fly, fail, test, fly, fail, test, fly, fail. That's how they work, and that's how it's worked for them. So I think questions about Super Heavy are probably next year. I would say probably next year. If they get an orbital Starship this year, it'd be a massive success.
Yeah, I think no earlier than this year we'd see Super Heavy hardware. But
I think we'll see the hardware. Yeah, I don't think we're talking about test launches with it.
Right, and that next year sounds more reasonable to me. And of course, I've continuously underestimated the pace at which Starship development continues. So the full disclosure, I could be off on that. But
it's like we said earlier, we're all guessing. We are guessing, and Elon will be asked questions like, I asked him a question once. When will this render of his Mars Base 1 become a reality? He said about 5 years. I was like, you can't be serious. But of course, he probably wasn't being totally serious. He was thinking ambitiously. But at the same time, our expectations of what it might be are always advanced by what he actually achieves. So you got to find a middle ground.
For those of you just joining us, we are looking at a live view of the SN6 engine section being moved around the production facility. These live views of Boca Chica being brought to us by Mary. She's out and about taking some pictures and stuff as well. But hope you are enjoying NSF Live. We're going to keep going through a ton of questions. We've still got a whole queue of questions to answer here. So while we're on the topic of timelines, Adam wants to know, what are the odds on Starship having its first cargo mission to Mars in 2022? That is the timeline that SpaceX has stressed so far. Chris, odds?
Sorry, I was awake. Can you repeat the question?
It's okay.
Sorry, odds 1 second, I just go and check something else.
The odds on Starship having its first cargo mission to Mars in 2022.
Oh, my word.
Well, you were saying a first orbital launch by next year doesn't seem too
Well,
far off.
the key word is cargo launch.
Right.
Because I always said the problem with getting to Mars for crewed space flight is the life support system. It is a massive undertaking. It really is. We see the challenges with the daily reports from the ISS, and that is just 200 miles above us. And they have so many challenges, and they have the support, and they have the resupply missions. They have everything to support them, and they still have the challenges. To be in those kind of challenges, hundreds of millions and millions of miles away, is going to be such a challenge that I think we're a long way off crewed space flight to Mars. So the cargo vehicles will be the training that they'll be able to test certain parts of life support with cargo missions just to see how it performs and how it can be maintained autonomously, and then see if they could apply humans to the mix and say, well, if we had this problem with a human crewed launch, we're able to fix it. So that's a problem solved. That's the problem we can deal with. So there's again a question of being able to accelerate the cargo launches to get those answers sooner, to be able to find a solution sooner so they can reduce the timescale to crewed launches to Mars, which Elon is all about. That is his driving ambition, is to get crewed launches to Mars. 2022 for cargo launches to Mars. To me, it sounds too ambitious, but I'm so used to programs that aren't this fast.
Right.
I'm not used to this pace, and I still can't get used to it, despite what we're seeing daily from Boca Chica. To me, it's extraordinary to the point it doesn't quite sink in. I am used to covering SLS. I'm used to covering shuttle. These are not programs where you're thinking in 2022. You're not thinking next year, 2 years. You're thinking 5 years. You're thinking 10 years. The crewed mission, the cargo missions for SLS to Mars are 2032.
Right.
2032. That is on a schedule. The first cargo mission with SLS to Mars is 2032. That is the timescales I'm used to. So when you say 2022 with Super Heavy, I'm kind of like drawn back to think, hang on a minute, that sounds too soon. So that is my long and non-Pacific answer to what you asked me.
Yeah, and I think the odds on 2022 are slim, but not. I mean, because you have to remember, getting to orbit with a prototype vehicle is one thing. A prototype vehicle that gets to orbit can literally just be fuel tanks, Raptor engines, and the overall shape of a Starship. But if you want to deliver something to the surface of either the moon or Mars, you need to have a pressure vessel to hold all that cargo in. You need to have the ability to unload that cargo somehow. So there's a lot more development that goes between reaching orbit and actually delivering payloads to the surfaces of other bodies.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing that makes me think, even if they reach orbit, next year, it'll be a bit after that,
And
before they actually.
it's landing technology. That'll be in
And yeah.
SpaceX's advantage because they've got so much experience with
Mhm.
landing technology. But landing on Mars is not easy. It's every other country apart from the United States has found out. Only the United States has landed on Mars. Only NASA missions has landed
Yep.
on Mars. It's JPL. It's that experience. They've got so much landing experience that I hope that SpaceX and NASA combine with these Mars missions to make sure they've got the best of both worlds with the knowledge, the financial support from NASA funding, and SpaceX's gun ho attitude. I think it's a marriage made in heaven, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And a quick new membership. Steve has joined the channel membership. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it. We were talking about different steel alloys that they're using for these Starship vehicles. And a question, does the 304L alloy that we believe they used on SN7, is that the new custom alloy that Elon's talking about? Elon wanted to develop their own sort of proprietary alloy.
Yeah.
Is this what we're looking at?
It's a good question. We think it's intermediate. We think that the new alloy is called 30X or something like that. There's an X in it. There's not a specific number where it's 304L. We think 304L is probably a step towards that, but not the final be all end all of what alloy he's looking for. That is the general thought of it. I don't know for a fact either ways, but with 304L, it's known. It's not like some special alloy. It's a known alloy. So I'm thinking when SpaceX talk about some special custom-made alloy, it can't be 304L.
Gotcha. Another question. Oh, back to the canards we were talking about earlier. Michael wants to know, where are the canards made, because they were trucked in. So we don't think they were made in Boca Chica, right?
No, we think they were made in Hawthorne and trucked over from Hawthorne.
So there you go. We think Hawthorne.
Yeah,
Which and there are lots of components to these vehicles that are made at the headquarters factory, right?
yeah, they are. I mean, you can remember the actual facility itself is really large, but you can also imagine we've not seen any photographs from the factory floor for a while now, and that was when the last time we saw it, it had about 6 or 7 Falcon 9 stages on there. And of course, they don't need that many Falcon 9s now anymore because they're all landing and being reused again. So the new ones are for commercial crew and missions such as that. They will have space on that factory floor to build items for Starship if they wanted to. We have no idea if they are, but I would think they've got enough factory space, factory floor space, to build elements for Starship, such as custom-made items, such as the canards.
And on that note, it's something we haven't really talked about because we've been focusing a lot about Starship, but people, pointing out that correctly that a lot of the Falcon 9 missions we're seeing these days are on reused boosters. And a lot of that has to do with they're launching lots of Starlink missions, which are internal payloads, so they can reach new higher levels of reuse, fifth flights for boosters, things like that. And Elon has said that they don't want to do that on customer payloads yet. They want to prove that these new reuse milestones are safe with their own internal payloads, and then come back and later on use those for more customer flights. But they have a limited fleet of boosters. So you say, we don't need to produce that many more boosters. But I mean, eventually, every once in a while they lose a booster because they reached a new reuse milestone. We know the first time they had a fifth flight, that booster didn't land properly, and so every once in a while you get a mission where you don't get the booster back. So, what do you think about sort of replenishing the fleet of Falcon 9 boosters, Chris?
I think it'll get interesting with Falcon Heavy. I mean, we haven't seen many of those launches recently, and I think they will get a use of a few of them. But with Starship coming online, that might remove some of the pressure on Falcon Heavy launches. So I might be inclined to think that they'll have a good stock of boosters to replenish what they need for customers who are happy and satisfied. And let's face it, a flight proven booster is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's shown it's flown before. It's worked.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's no real difference between a first flying booster and one that's free flown, providing it's not flown more than 6-7 times, because then you're into the unknowns. But they'll use those for Starlink launches, which are company internal. So I think I think they might need a few more, but they won't need that many more, and that will allow them to progress onto Starship and just use the current stock they've got as kind of like for what customers need cheaply and what their particular needs are.
I agree with you, and I think the limiting factor for their kind of launch cadence on the East Coast now, they removed a big part of it when they brought Just Read the Instructions, another drone ship online on the East Coast. That reduces the requirement, like, yeah, you have to bring a drone ship back to port, unload the booster, and then go back out. You now can have two drone ships kind of on mission at a single time, and we saw that with Demo 2 and one of the Starlink missions.
Yeah.
So they've already removed that constraint. They also have two launch pads, so they're not really limited by launch pad turnaround.
And
So
do
might
you remember the time we had expendable boosters? That's been
yeah,
a while
back
now, hasn't it? Yeah, it's been a long while since last said, "Oh, Falcon 9 expendable." So
I
they're not doing that anymore. So that's one thing.
I think was the last expendable mission that first GPS flight.
Yeah,
I can't.
it was so
That
heavy.
might have
Yeah,
been the last one. With Block 5, they're really trying to recover all of them. And with the upcoming GPS missions, because we know we have their second one for SpaceX, the third overall, is launching at the end of this month if the schedule holds. And they're actually planning to land the booster on that mission. So after the first flight went well, yeah, they talked with the Air Force who runs the GPS program and said, "Okay, we're go ahead. We're good with the fuel margins for landing and stuff like that. You can launch a GPS satellite while still landing your booster."
yeah.
And so
We've forgotten about one. Daryl Strauss in chat said IFA was technically expendable.
that is true.
Yeah,
And
it
flight
was, wasn't it?
Apollo
They
2
blew it up.
became an expendable rocket. So that's probably the most recent one. You're right. That's a good point.
Oh,
I bet they would have tried to land it if they could have.
yeah. I'm just wondering, have we got Mary back on microphone? Is she still taking pictures?
Yeah.
Oh, there's
No, I'm
Mary.
here.
Can
Welcome
you see
back,
any
Mary.
action? Anyone in the crane who's ready to lift a section for us?
I can hear a lot of work being done inside the high bay. Maybe the stand isn't quite ready.
Ah, right.
Is what I'm thinking. Yeah.
But that's what we're gonna, for people who are not used to this, and there won't be many people because everyone's watching Starship videos these days. That is the engine section for Starship SN6. The rest of SN6 is in the high bay, and they're just going to add that bit to the top of it, to the left-hand side of it, and they'll stack the big part on top of it. So that's why that's the bottom of SN6 you're looking at right there. And then you'll have a stack just like next door neighbor, which is SN5, which is on the left-hand side of your picture. And SN5 will roll to the launch site in the coming days, we hope. Which makes me think, what's the third section on the right, farthest right-hand side? That's the ring. That's a nose cone section. They'll put a nose cone on top of that, and that'll probably go into SN6 herself. So that'll be a full Starship stack. And we think, Mary, they will stack the nose cone at the launch site. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing to see.
It will, because they're very tall. I mean, we're looking at SN5 on the farthest left-hand side now. That is the booster, but they'll then put, if you can imagine that's SN6 for a second, they'll put that right-hand side ring section on top of that booster, and they'll put a nose cone on top of that as well. So it'd be literally about a third higher than what we used to see in the launch site from previous SN4, SN2, and what have you. So that'll be something to really look forward to, because with a nose cone on top, it'll actually look like a proper booster rather than a silo for once. So that will be, and they'll have the canyards on as well. So it will look a bit more like we saw during the presentation with Mark 1. It'll look a little bit more like that, except a lot smoother, a lot more shiny, and a lot more like a space-worthy vehicle.
All right, we got a couple super chats that have come in here. A new member, Alan, has joined the channel. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it. And a super chat from Christopher. It's midnight in Norway, listening to you guys and trying to spot Starlinks. A perfect evening. That sounds like a great time. Thank you for tuning in from Norway. We appreciate it. And good luck with your Starlink spotting. I keep getting unlucky because in my area, every time there's a launch, the Starlinks come overhead and it's completely overcast and I see nothing.
Yeah. Same here. It's always cloudy. Always cloudy.
Although, given the launch cadence of Starlink these days, I would think that eventually, mathematically, it's pretty hard for it to even be possible not to see anything, just because of how often they're launching. So
Well,
hopefully one of these days.
According to astronomers, all you can see is Starlinks in the sky. So I mean, I'm surprised we don't spot them all the time, because that's all there is in the sky now. It's just Starlinks, apparently.
I will point out that I've actively looked to find the Starlink satellites and haven't seen them. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm not going to touch that conversation too much.
Don't worry, I will for you on your behalf.
We are getting to where we would normally end our NASA Spaceflight live show. Again, if you tune in with us every week, you know it's usually about hour and a half. Usually it's hosted by Das. He's got the day off today, so it's me, Chris, and Mary just hanging out, doing some Q&A and looking at live Starship stuff. We're not about to cut away from live Starship stacking activities that we can bring you live. So I think we're gonna not quite wrap up at our normal time. Maybe a sort of NSF live encore, if you will.
Yeah, I was just happy the fact that Mary's moved, because I know that the constraint for me was Mary being at the launch site and then doing some work and then her seeing her doing some work in the production area. So I'm glad she's there where she needs to be for these events. So that's what's taking the constraint away from me.
Yeah,
And
this is
we also
Michael
got
behind the
Todd is
scenes.
a new membership for the channel, so we appreciate you, Todd. Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly, Mary, how are you doing out there? And if you want to at any time, shut the stream down and go eat dinner or go move to another position where you can film better, just let us know. No, we'll do whatever you want to do.
I'm doing great. I wouldn't move from here.
Okay, in that case, we'll just keep going.
Michael, you want to run through a quick launch preview for next week, and then we can move into full encore mode with Starship stuff? What do you think?
Okay, so that's a good idea. We'll wrap up the normal NSF live routine, and then we'll just stay live and see what happens with the first section. So
Absolutely. Okay, so
I'm queuing up.
Yeah, just bring up the launch preview graphic, and we'll do that
There
real
we go.
quick. Again, thank you all for joining us for this week's edition of NSF Live. We're going to stay live for a bit longer, hang out with Starship, but first we want to preview what's going on next week like we normally do. 3 orbital launches on the agenda, 2 from China. The Long March 3B rocket will actually make its return to flight mission. Last flight, flying a mission for PSN ended in failure, so they are returning to flight with actually what I believe is the final satellite for the BeiDou satellite navigation constellation. I could be wrong there. I'm pretty sure this is the last one, or it's getting near close to the end. But they're finishing their version of their GPS constellation, basically. That's coming up this week. Also, a Long March 2D rocket with a Gaofen satellite. And then another return to flight from Arianespace, the Vega rocket. Will make its return to flight mission carrying a rideshare mission with, I think, 20 plus satellites on board. So those are the 3 orbital launches coming up. And of course, there's always the chance for kind of surprise missions from Chinese companies and things like that to come up. But that's what we've got on the agenda so far. So look forward to that. And I also want to thank our members and people who have joined memberships from the stream. Again, people who do memberships and super chats, you are the reason that we get to do what we do. Bring you all these live coverage from Boca Chica. We invest all this right into new equipment and things like that so we can improve our coverage. So everyone on your screen, launch directors and flight engineers, thank you so much for your membership support. We greatly appreciate it. This also goes for everyone who's given us super chats and everyone who's just tuning into these streams. We really do greatly appreciate it. My name is Thomas Burghardt. I am a writer reporter for NASASpaceflight, and I've kind of been our host tonight. I'm joined by Chris Bergin, the founder and managing editor of NASASpaceflight. And of course, these live views are brought to us by Mary, the Boca Chica gal herself. And she is out there giving us these live views. We just got a whole team in our behind the scenes working on chat and moderating. Ian Atkinson and Jared, all of those people in chat, thank you so much for your support. And of course, Michael Baylor doing the production behind the scenes. Thank you so much to him. And again, everyone who tunes in, we could not do it without your support, so we appreciate it. I believe we are going to transition to a bit of an encore here. At least that's what I'm going to stick with calling it. And watch the Starship teams work through some stacking operations for SN6. We've got the engine section here. I believe I'm going to step away and let Chris, Mary, and Michael take over. What do you guys think? Does that sound good?
Yeah,
Yep.
it sounds good. Depends on, don't know what we're going to talk about, though. We'll take some more questions from chat if they want to ask some more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep the Q&A going. They will still be able to see the chat queue and answer your questions, so continue. I am going to step away at the conclusion of this week's NSF Live, but they will stay live and continue some live Starship action. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, Thomas.
Okay, so I was working behind the scenes. I'm Michael Baylor. I will now talk a bit to help keep Chris and Mary from having to talk for an hour, because we do not know how long it's going to take until they lift this Starship SN6 thrust section. But as Thomas was mentioning, we normally have a 90-minute NSF Live episode where we talk about the week in spaceflight or answer your questions about Starship every Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern. So if you're just joining us, that's what we were wrapping up. And then we saw this thrust section lift happening. So we decided to stay live a little bit longer and find out what's about to happen. So we got Mary and Chris B here watching this with us.
Good question, actually, in chat. I just noticed how in the world will they be able to comfortably test a super heavy booster without wasting a lot of Raptors? There's a gamble. If they lose the super heavy booster during a testing, they will lose the Raptors as well, just like we saw with SM4. So that's the gamble. There's no comfortable way of doing it. You've got to launch with the Raptors and hope for the best. But I think they will obviously cost that in to the test program's gambles. They will expect to lose vehicles, especially SpaceX, because that's how they work. They work on testing vehicles to failure, and if they succeed and they save it, that's just a bonus. But when they do fail, they learn a lot from it, and that helps them in the future going forward. So that will be costed into it. There is no way, unfortunately, though, to comfortably test anything with regards to a new vehicle. They've got to test things to failure, and if it doesn't fail, it's a bonus. If it does fail, they'll learn from it. Another question here. Do you think SM5, SN6 will go to 3 Raptors straight away? No, I think SM5 will go to 1 Raptor, like it was going to do with like SM4 did, I should say. We don't know which Raptor they're going to use yet. I think that'd be a fun one for Mary to find, because Mary found out which Raptor was going with SM4 because she saw it on a forklift truck with its name written on the side of its engine bell. So, which is always fun as well, because
Yeah, it's always fun to see them.
yeah, it's like having name tags for employees. All these hardwares have got their names written on the side of the things. The funny thing is with Raptors is we don't know if the SN number for the Raptor is the engine bell or the engine itself, but we found out that the SN18 and SN20 engines have been SN18, SN20. So if Mary sees a new Raptor rolling down the highway on a forklift truck, as it does, with a SN21 or whatever it'll be, written on its engine bell, we'll know what engine it is. And that'll be SM5's single engine. And I do believe they will go to 3 Raptors until they go for the 20-kilometer hop. So that's what I think. Okay, do you think SN18 is broken because of the swap with SN20? Yes-ish. I do think that they swapped it out because there was something they weren't quite happy with SN18. We don't know if we went back to McGregor for fixing, and we might see SN18 come back out again. We might see SN18 be mated with SM5, Starship SN5, I should say. That's a good question and something to watch. Obviously, it wasn't anything dramatic. It did a static fire. It looked perfectly fine. It got the data results. I think they were just not completely confident with it going forward, and they had another Raptor waiting, standing by. Might as well swap them out. That's their thinking, probably. But we've probably assumed that SN18 was taken back to McGregor, was fixed, and was then maybe coming back out again. Or they might put a new Raptor completely on SM5. So we'll find out soon. It'd be nice if they could start calling the Raptors and the Starships different serial numbers as well, rather than just SN. Because SN18 on SM5, SN20 and SM4 gets a bit confusing after a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can see if we have some more questions. How will astronauts get in and out of Starship?
Through the door. There'll be a hatch on the side. No, seriously though. We can go on the animations of them deploying the Mars lander. So the Mars lander, the Moon lander, the Moon rover, I should say, on the latest schematic, the latest render we've had of Starship from SpaceX and NASA, and there is literally a big hatch. We've seen the original ITS, they used to call it, Interplanetary Space Program, Space Transportation System. They later called it BFR, which we won't say live on air what it really means. And that showed people leaving a hatch, but that was very much artistic license involved. We didn't see anything detail wise, but I just think it'd be a big hatch. Do you think, another question for Up Pit, do you think that SN17 will be tested destruction? I think in SN7, I think you mean there by that. I don't know. We call them boppers because the naming behind that is there was Star Hopper. We had Starship, which went pop. We call it Star Popper. And the test tanks are baby Star Hoppers, those Star Poppers, and they're called boppers. And that's where that name came from. The reason why we called them that is because they're designed to test destruction. We know one didn't destroy it; it stayed intact, and it got to the right bar levels they were looking for. So there's no reason why they have to destroy it or push it to destruction. I think they'll push it to a certain level and get the results they want. If it pops, fair enough, they'll learn something from it. If it doesn't pop, great, passed. They've got a test done. So they can't really lose too much from whatever happens to it. But I don't think it would be designed to be pushed to destruction unless they want to really really, really want to see how far they can take it before it does lose its pressurization.
Are Raptors built in McGregor?
Probably a question
answer-
for you, Michael.
Yeah, so the Raptors are built in Hawthorne, California at SpaceX's headquarters. Then they are shipped to McGregor, where they are tested on one of the 3 Raptor test stands that they have there. They also are capable of servicing the Raptors in McGregor, so a lot of them get refurbished or upgraded at the McGregor facility. But from when they're built from scratch, they're first built in Hawthorne, California.
There's a nice little a story behind the Raptor testing where they were going to use Star Hopper as a vertical test stand for Raptor firing. So Elon mentioned it once. That plan obviously is not going to happen anymore. But they then took the tripod stand, which was being left redundant for quite a long time. It was used for testing the original Falcon 9 boosters before they moved the test stand. They refitted it and made it into a Raptor test stand, a vertical rest stand. So they've got 2 bays and a Raptor test stand for horizontal testing, and they've got 1 vertical Raptor test stand at McGregor, which was the former Falcon 9 tripod stand.
Yeah, I kind of wonder how long it's going to be. I think it's only a matter of time until they build a dedicated Raptor testing stand in Boca Chica, because with the amount of Raptors that they're going to have, they're going to need extra capacity. And if they're launching super heavy down here, that's going to be a lot of Raptors on site at any time. There's going to be a good chance that they're going to want to test some of those individually without having to ship them back to McGregor.
Yeah, and like we've seen that with Blue Origin. Blue Origin do all their testing in West Texas, but they've built a dedicated test stand for their engines and test stands for their stages at the launch site on the Cape. So yeah, you can see that how that progression works better for them where they've got test stand on situ as such.
Mary, can you hear us?
Yes.
How long do you usually? I know it kind of varies a lot, but can it be like several hours once the Starship thrust section is hooked up before they move it, or do you think we're going to see it move in the next, like half hour or so?
I wouldn't want to even try to predict when it will get moved.
I can answer that. I can answer that. They'll move it as soon as we go off live.
True.
There's a crane operator with a laptop, and he's just waiting till we go off air.
Yeah, so if you're just joining, the thrust section for SN6 has been hooked up, and we assume it's going to be moved into the high bay for stacking with the SN6 tank section, but we're not sure exactly when they're going to start to lift.
There's a quick point there by Mr. Dave who says Blue Origin is going to test engines in Huntsville. Yeah. They're going to do it in several places, but they've also got that test stand at the Cape site. So they've also got one at the launch site, which is the point Michael was making about having a Raptor test site at Boca Chica. It's about locality. It's about cutting down on shipping times and transportation, all that business. You've got something ready and waiting for you there to do the testing.
Question: how fast are Raptors made? I'm not sure we've seen a length of how long it takes to make them, but Elon has said that he's hoping to get the production cadence to about at least an engine a day, because it's super heavy. They're going to need 31 engines plus 6 or 7 on the Starship. So that's a lot of engines per vehicle for the full stack. So they're going to have a very high production cadence, even with usability. Just to get the first fleet of vehicles built, they're going to have to be producing a lot of Raptors, but I'm not sure that we've seen an end-to-end time of how long it takes a Raptor to be built from start to finish.
It'd be like their car plants, Tesla car plants, won't it? Be where they've got like a line of production, and they'll have Raptors at different various stages of production. So it'll have like a starting point and end point, and just as long as they're bringing a Raptor out complete every one a day, which is what Elon's aiming for, that's their goal. But they'll probably have he'll probably use a lot of Tesla experience with the production lines. So That'll be hopefully we'll see some video of that one day. He's not shy of showing raptors. We've noticed that, where we've been quite wary about showing pictures of raptors, but then he suddenly tweeted out a picture of one right up close. So we're thinking obviously he's not got a problem with it. So hopefully we'll start seeing some video production as well.
A couple of questions about the COPVs. There's the black, small, skinny tanks on the side of Starship. Those store highly compressed gas, often helium, sometimes nitrogen, and those are used to pressurize Starship. Eventually, they want to use the hot gases from the Raptor to repressurize the tank, but we're not sure if they're doing that yet. It might be that they're using helium to repressurize the tanks for now, at least until they move towards the orbital version of Starship. And they can also use the COPVs to power the reaction control system. They are planning to move to a hot gas thruster system where they would use liquid oxygen and methane to power the thrusters on the reaction control system. But for now, it appears that they are using nitrogen stored in those COPVs to power the reaction control system on the current version of the Starship prototypes.
And I hope they do eventually move away from COPVs, because I've got shuttle memories of COPVs before the incidents with the two Falcon 9s, which were lost because of these COPVs. I remember a shuttle engineer saying to me that he dreaded the final 3 days before launch, because that was their S0007. That's what they called it, S0007 countdown milestones. And the first on the list was to pressurize the COPVs in the shuttle orbiter. And they said that was probably the most dangerous part, apart from launch itself, was pressurizing these COPVs. So I had that in the back of my mind from the early days during shuttle, that when the COPVs were responsible for the two Falcon 9 losses, I was thinking, it's those damn things again. So that's why I hope they kind of like move away from it. But that's a personal kind of like wish list.
Yes. If you're wondering what COPV stands for, it is Composite Overwrapped Pressure Vessel. A question about Kathy. I'm guessing you're talking about Kathy Leaders. Yes, she was appointed to be the new head of human spaceflight at NASA. So she was the current program manager for the Commercial Crew program, and now with her new role, she will be overseeing not just Commercial Crew but also the Artemis program. So that's a big appointment for NASA, and she was definitely one of the most qualified people to take that position.
And I'll just quickly add again, I don't want to keep adding to your questions, adding to your answers, but she's done a great job. She goes back many years, the Commercial Crew program. It was originally run by a guy called Mr. McAllister, and he was with Kathy Luders. She came through him into the program. So we knew it was a good appointment at the time, and she really took it forward through a lot of challenges. It's been through the run of the mill with the funding being taken away. Well, not taken away, but certainly reduced during some budget cycles, and she's kept the program going, and she's got the end result now. You could see the change. She's always been quite stern-faced and quite driven and quite I would never say cold, but very much focused, shall I say. But the reason why I say that is because after DM2 launched, her facial expression, you could really see it in the photograph. It was a complete release of pressure that the goals had been achieved of what had been several years of battling. I just thought that was really, really nice to see those photographs of just seeing her celebrating, because we'd never seen her do that before, because she'd never had a reason to do it. But it was just a lovely thing where you see some dedicated NASA manager just acting like a fan, like the rest of us, because it's just that huge achievement.
Duncan asks, can Starship launch to an orbital inclination from Boca Chica that can go over Florida, or can they only launch in inclinations that fly over the Gulf?
I'll let you to that, Michael, because I don't know.
At least for now, flying over land is a pretty big no-no in spaceflight, unless you are Russia, where you can launch over land, but it's not populated, or you are China, where you just let the boosters fall in people's houses. But until there's a dramatic increase in reliability, I think the FAA, who regulates launches in the United States, is not going to allow much of that. It does depend on how downrange land is. Obviously, once you're in orbit, at some point you are going to fly over land regardless. But as long as you are on a suborbital trajectory with the possibility of ballistic debris coming back down onto land, the FAA is generally not like that.
Yeah, I
so
mean,
we'll have to see what happens.
we can ask Mary. Mary, how? What's the main population areas around this area of Texas? Should we say within like 100-mile radius? Is it Brownsville? Anything else?
Well, South Padre Island
Oh, right,
is
yeah.
like 6 miles away. Port Isabel, trying to think, 100 miles, there's Harlingen, I'm not sure how far McAllen is. I mean, it's quite populated.
Yeah, so it's a real no-no. You've got to go over sea. You've got to go over water. Yeah.
I guess we'll have to like. Well, I mean, Boca Chica is so far south in terms of. It's almost as far south as the tip of Florida, so the Starship's going to head towards the equator anyway, so it's more efficient. So it's not going to be that much of a. It's not going to have to go out of its way really to get past Florida, so I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the map myself right now. It's you can go kind of like southeast, and you're over water a lot. So yeah, you're pretty much going towards equator that way. That's not too bad.
Yeah, polar launches from Boca Chica might be difficult.
Yeah,
but they are probably going to launch Starship at some point from Cape or Kennedy Space Center from Path 39A. And there is a new polar quarter from 39A that they could use. But that is one case where there is a small amount of overflight of land, particularly Cuba. But that does help, at least for Falcon 9, that has been something that SpaceX has been granted approval to do, because Falcon 9 is almost in orbit, just a second stage is slightly suborbital at that point. So the risk to population is quite low. But we'll have to see what happens to Starship. Of course, Starship's also going to be re-entering over land, probably in most cases. So that's a big vehicle coming in over land, but the Space Shuttle also did that. So we'll just have to see what happens, but I'm sure SpaceX is going to have to do a lot of testing and a lot of analysis to prove to the FAA that it is safe to have a large vehicle of Starship size re-entering overpopulated areas. And again, if you're just joining us, we're just hanging out here, waiting to see if they're going to lift this thrust section for Starship SN6 anytime soon. It hasn't hooked up to the crane for a while now, but Mary, do you still hear sounds coming from the high bay?
Not recently. No, it's pretty quiet right now.
Perhaps that's a good sign. Mary did report a lot of noises from the high bay earlier, which could have been a sign that they were still preparing the stand for the arrival of the thrust section. But at least for now, there are less noises, so perhaps they're nearly ready, or it could be something totally unrelated. We aren't able to see what's happening inside the high bay because from our angle, there is a big wall of metal right now, but hopefully we're going to see some action here shortly. Again, if you have questions in chat, just tag at NASASpaceflight and working. Yeah, we're just discussing in our back channel what we want to do here. It does look like there is not a lot of action with Starship SN6 right now, so we might just wrap it up here, and then Mary will stay out there and we'll post a video of the lift onto our YouTube channel and our normal daily updates video as soon as it happens. But that would save all of you watching this right now from having to wait several hours potentially to find out when the lift happens. Instead, you can just subscribe to the channel, and as soon as it happens, we'll have the video up for you. So that might be the best way to do it. What do you think, Chris and Mary?
I think that's a good idea because we know that with Mary out there, a lot of people look forward to her videos where we can time lapse it as well, because a lot of people like to watch the time lapse of these lifts. So if anything, it'd be fun if it'd been live. Let's face it, it'd been fun. But I think just the fact that we're seeing this live shot right now has been fantastic fun. And thanks very much, Mary, for providing 2 views of the launch site and a production area as well.
Yeah, no problem. I always enjoy doing this.
Yeah, so thank you all for watching an extended episode of NSF Live. We normally do a 90-minute episode where we answer your questions and talk about the latest news, but we did see the Starship SN6 thrust section action towards the end of our show, so we wanted to stay live a bit longer to see if we could catch the lift, but it does look like it could be an indefinite amount of time. We have no idea when it's going to move, so we could be out here for hours waiting for something to happen. So I think it is best that we wrap it up here. And again, Mary will post that video as soon as she gets it, and we'll get it on YouTube. So again,
and thanks to all the supporters who've done super chats and memberships. It's all very much appreciated. Very much appreciated. We see them all. We do see them all. We put them in a list and everything. So it's not like we don't notice. We do notice every single one of them. So thanks very much.
And the voice you just heard there was Chris Bergin. We also, of course, have Mary providing us our live view, and then I am Michael Baylor, and that is going to wrap it up. We'll play our awesome video from Jack Bayer one more time, and let you have a good rest of your evening with that fun highlight clip.
Pressure looks good. Rolling up. Roger roll, Atlantic. Water tower supply! Somebody downside of feed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.